We passed the rule to prevent camping after the Occupy movement. There were syringes around everywhere. There were rats coming around. It was pretty bad, and people were starting to complain. So we relied upon the architectural aesthetics to pass the rule when they challenged us on that. And we want to protect the educational experience for students. So this is ancillary. We invite the public to come on to community colleges, but our primary mission is to go ahead and educate students. And as I mentioned, how do you do it? You have written policies and rules. You have First Amendment rules in your, what we call the WAC, the Washington Administrative Code. And it says how students and non-students alike can use your facilities and how we limit the time, place, and manner. And we can use the same thing for posting policies as well. This has to be consistent and content and viewpoint neutral. And you have to be careful if you exercise unbridled discretion in those policies. So I don't like that message. I'm going to take that down. That's called unbridled discretion. And when I was arguing in the Ninth Circuit about the case here at Washington, I said, hey, we need some discretion. And one of the judges told me, he said, that's very, very dangerous. So, but we prevailed. Prior restraint, it has to be compelling under the U.S. Constitution. Under Washington law, it's per se unconstitutional. Prior restraint means you prevent somebody from speaking. So if you withhold funds, that's a prior restraint. If you censor something, that's a prior restraint. If you charge a fee, that's also one. The UW lost when they charged their student organizations. They made them post a bond to have some kind of an event. It was a conservative event, and the court struck that down as well. So Washington says it's per se unconstitutional. So what we say for non-students is that we encourage them when they come onto campus to check with campus security to see if there's space available, but we don't require them to do so. And it's one of the first things that we see in these preacher cases across the country is they usually sue because they were prevented from coming onto campus for up to 14 days sometimes. Those have been struck down. So we love this case. It's called Whitmore versus Vincent out of the University of Missouri, and it's probably one of the most cited footnotes for U.S. constitutional cases from the Supreme Court. But they talk about that sure, we allow for free speech at the universities, but the university's mission is education. And I bolded that we have not held that you have to make your campus available equally to non-students as you would for students. You can. We have at the CL colleges for outside areas, but non-students can't come into the buildings to protest, whereas students can. So there's a distinction between non-students and students. And I mentioned there are types of campus forums. Some of them, they were barring people down in, that was Texas, the Faulkner case, where they said that the sidewalks abutted the college property and they were traditional public forums. And if you designate your campus as a open forum for non-students, then it's an open forum. You've done that here in CL colleges. And some colleges have free speech zones. They're kind of hard to enforce. You can only stand out in the courtyard would be a free speech zone. So after the Occupy movement issue, we had a campus group, a community group get together to draft your rules. And they didn't like free speech zones. They said, they want to wander outside, they can wander outside, just don't block traffic. And we don't really care. Next one. And some colleges have actually closed their campuses to non-students. And you could do that. It's a designated forum, and you decided to close it. And that's down in Texas. There have been a couple of them. But most of our presidents say that we're a community college, we're for the community. So we like to let the community come on. And it's part of the educational experience. You'll see some people with some weird ideas, but okay, now you're exposed to some weird ideas, and you can either take it or not take it. We do limit amplifiers here. You can't use amplifiers. Some students, some don't allow only a certain number of non-students to come onto campus. Is it reasonable? Dead zones during exams, that's been upheld. And the speech zones need to be reasonable and in a good location. You can't put them out in the woods where nobody's there. And that's basically a primer on the First Amendment. I could talk for a long, long time on it. But that's what we're operating under. There was a recent case out of the Supreme Court involving the Westboro Baptists. I don't know if you've heard of them or not, but they're a real fringe group, and they tend to protest at veteran funerals. And they say that they died because this is God's wrath for our society accepting gays. And you know, it's hateful speech. You know, people are at a funeral, and these guys are out there, you know, protesting. And Justice Roberts said, you know, hate speech is the price we pay for free speech. So, you know, if we start closing off speech that we don't like, then, you know, it's going to erode our First Amendment rights. So there are ways to counter it, and I think we'll talk about them.
Okay, thank you very much, Derek. We're going to go back to our panelists. This one is for two of our VPs, Joe and Pete. And Elijah had a really good point earlier about, we were talking about sort of two things. There's in the classroom and then also outside folks coming to our campus. So this brings it back to, I'd say, the classroom. The question is, where we see free speech issues play out can often be in the classroom. And so a question that we have is, can you walk us through the differences in, say, classroom management versus what speech that becomes a student conduct issue?
First of all, I want to thank the President for setting this up. I love the series idea, but I also in particular think this is a timely topic, and I appreciate the opportunity to not only speak, but also to listen to everybody and to learn as well. Warren said something in his video that kind of frames the message that I wanted to share with everybody, and in particular focusing on the classroom environment, and that was that we have to remember to respect the learning environment. We are here our mission is to educate, and it's not always in the classroom, but it's primarily in the classroom where that happens. For those of you who don't know, I was faculty here for a long time. I've taught at several different colleges. I taught what is a much less contentious subject than political science, and in some cases history. I taught biology, but even in biology classes, there were topics primarily around evolution that we would discuss that brought up emotional responses. And more than once did I have students try to counter the lessons on evolution with their own ideas or with ideas that they were more comfortable with. For me, as a faculty, and the advice that I give to faculty, it really starts on day one. And this isn't just about discussions or just about the conversations that may happen in class, but it really should be for the whole, all of the experiences that happen in that classroom. And that is to frame your expectations about how conversations should happen, remind that everybody is an individual to be respected and to be heard in the classroom, but with the limitations that are available legally, and then also with the expectations that you set forward as a faculty member, sometimes conversations will be cut off. And so I found, and believe me, I didn't start this way, but I found once I had been burned several times by letting conversations get out of hand, that by starting the quarter with those expectations, and starting really frankly with some community building exercises, that it went a long way towards setting the rest of the quarter up for free, not always agreeable, but for free speech, learning speech in the classroom itself. So when I think about that classroom management, I think really from the beginning, the expectations of the faculty member and of the students should be front and center on the table, and then you work from there.
And from the perspective, can you hear me? I think what Pete has outlined is actually sort of the very beginning component of sort of any conduct. Because if the expectation for a student is very clear in the classroom, we let our students know, here is what communication, here is email communication, here is our expectation in terms of how you will communicate or how you will behave in the classroom. If that's very clear to the student, then when a student does not meet those expectations, then it's very clear for a faculty member to say, we need to have a conversation because the expectations that we've outlined are not being met. And once a faculty member has had that conversation with the student, they can let their faculty, their department chair know that this has happened, because part of the conduct process is trying to balance three things: faculty support, a student's right to education, and to preserve the learning environment that is there, and also ensuring due process for the student, making sure that we are following process that's needed to ensure that the students' rights are being held as well. So those are the three things that we are trying to kind of balance whenever we have to take a look at a conduct issue that comes to my office. So as Pete said, if that is really clear, if expectations are clear and set in the classroom, it makes it so much easier for a faculty member to say, well, Joe, I think this is a conduct issue because these are the things that I have done to remediate the issue or the situation, and the student isn't following the guidelines for the conduct that's been set in the classroom.
All right, thank you very much. We just have a couple more questions, and then we're going to go to questions from the audience. So one we have for DeAndre. The question here, so, I think at North we're proud that we welcome students of all backgrounds, employees of all backgrounds. Warren had a question here. He said, it seems there can sometimes be a fine line where we need inclusion of perspectives, but if not handled well, those perspectives can lead to the exclusion of students and employees and the feeling of being unsafe, which I think Elijah articulated pretty well. So the question is, how do we balance the right to free speech and keeping the campus feeling safe?
Absolutely. Okay. So my thought process on it is really what everybody has said. I have to echo pretty much. I think we all stand the same. The problem comes when Joe, myself, and Peter, they really setting that standard. But what if that standard doesn't align with someone who we hired? Meaning that they are allowing this to happen in their classroom and they don't see a problem with it and they're agreeing with the student who we feel may have really hurt or offended or made the situation unsafe. So what then happens is like we say, like was seen in the PowerPoint, it then causes a counter reaction. Then that raises the energy level, and the energy level can then turn very violent and hostile. So then how do you respond to that? I believe that everybody has the right to whatever beliefs that they want to believe or whatever political beliefs they want to believe, but how do you respectfully have that dialogue is going to be key. But also ensuring that in this space, in the culture that we're trying to create here in North, in the role and the lens that I'm using as a Chief Diversity Officer, it's very simple, plain, and direct. If your words that you're using becomes hostile to another person, then we have a problem. And we need to address it, and we need to address it very, very quickly, because if we do not address it, then that's when we see protesting happen. That's when we see a lot of things happening and resistance happening. And as we stated earlier, this is not a new issue. When you talk about how students of color felt in the classrooms prior to free speech, just being able to walk around and see that they're not welcome or wanted, but now that they have a voice, now we can say, oh, I'm using my free speech. But they've been dealing with this. People, marginalized communities, underserved communities, been dealing with going in educational environments since the creation of educational systems, because they were never created for marginalized communities in the beginning. So we can talk about a whole bunch of things there. But what we do, and people know me now here in North, so they know I'll go in. So what I think we should do, and what we have been doing, is first addressing that we know that political climate is going to change, and we need to be ready, because if we don't address it when it happens, then we will fall into what happened in Missouri, what happened in other institutions. So just be prepared, prepare ourselves to have those conversations with our students if we have not had it already, and then with our faculty. And don't expect everybody to understand that that could be a problem. Just prepare for the worst so you can always be ready, is how I feel.
So Andre, say what you said in training yesterday about allies.
Oh, come on now.
Yeah, you remember?
And then also too, in this environment, sometimes when you know something is being said and you know it's hurtful and harmful, being a true ally is standing up for that community to say, hey, you know what, that's not right. Don't always let the person who's being hurt and harmed have to stand up for themselves. Be an accomplice too. Thank you for doing that.
All right, thank you, DeAndre. And now, last question, at least for me, goes to Jeff Young. So Jeff, the question that we have is, when is the best time to contact campus security? You know, if it's done too soon, someone could feel that they're being targeted or harassed by employees or fellow students. However, if it's done too late, people who are feeling threatened or unsafe would feel like we perceive it as just not being a big deal. So when is it right to call security?
Well, you should call security whenever you don't feel comfortable as far as safe. Let's say we don't feel safe. Comfort level, that's a little different. We all, you know, especially in this environment where we're talking and different ideas are clashing and we're trying to, you know, learn. There's going to be some discomfort. But when you don't feel safe, that's when you need to call us. I've been the guy in uniform standing between the right and the left. I've had this stuff thrown at me when I had the face shield on and the helmet on. I've been there. I've been to really well done big events, and I've been to really poorly done well events. And both of them were planned, but you know, sometimes the planning just didn't work out. We didn't anticipate certain things. But it's from the student perspective, especially if you're going to have an event, the earliest you can come to us. And we're not going to try to talk you out of it. I mean, we'll tell you the good point and the bad point. We just want it to be the safest event it can be for you. We want you to get your point across. If there's going to be opposing viewpoints, that's okay. We just want to make sure it's done safely. That's our job. And the ones that went really bad a lot of times were those that were the students just wouldn't talk to us. Even to the very last moment. They wouldn't tell us what they were going to do, where they were going to meet, anything. They just wouldn't talk to us. And those are hard to plan for. So come talk to us. We will try to make it as safe as possible. And this is a loving community. I found that I've been here 6 months. It's a loving, learning community. And people really do care for each other here. And don't let the outsiders, like we said, don't let the outsiders make it a bad event. There are groups out there who, they don't care about your issue or that you want to have a successful event. They just want disruption. And we don't want to be on the map. We don't want North Seattle to be on the map because some outsiders came in and did not represent our culture, our values, and our community. So work with us. We'll work with you. But when you don't feel safe, that's when you need to come see us. And we will find out why. We'll try to talk to the other side if possible and bring everybody together. And if it's just not safe, maybe we won't do it, but we sure will try. That's our commitment to you.
All right, thank you so much. So at this time, we've got about 30 minutes. We'd like to open it up to audience questions. And just one note, because we're filming this, if you would raise your hand when you have a question, and we're going to run microphones to you just to make sure we get it on camera to share with folks who missed it. So we'll go ahead and open it up. Any questions?
I'm turning the camera.
Yeah, switch mic. I think that's a better mic.
There's no way. There's no way that you guys heard that and there are no questions.
I can talk more.
Yeah.
I can talk more. That's not a problem. Can you hear me? Great. So Derek talked about fighting speech with speech, and I think you should know that that's coming from places you would not expect right now. Former President Bush, too, of the same political party as Trump, has openly come out and spoken against the language that is insightful being utilized by Trump. This has been unheard of in modern politics, but it's not just him. This week on Monday, Ronald Reagan's daughter wrote a letter condemning the use of speech and hateful rhetoric from the White House, saying that her father would not have supported it either. And this morning, Speaker of the House Ryan spoke out against the birther executive order that is being discussed in the news by Mr. Trump too. So there is fight with speech. And we want you to know as faculty that we are hearing that many people want to understand how they can civically engage and how they can use their voices in the best way possible. Terry Chung and I are meeting next Tuesday to talk about creating a civic engagement voice, because when you talk, we want you to be heard. And I want to just say one more time, if you sit in a position of privilege, use your voice for those who don't feel safe to do so.
Derek, in your, I think it was your first slide, you had the state constitution, and there was a phrase in there, I can't remember, I'm trying to paraphrase it. It said something about having to take responsibility for your speech, I believe.
Being responsible for the
Being-
abuse of that right.
Yeah, exactly. That was it. Can you explain how that's actually played out in any concrete way?
You know, it's funny, when you look at these constitutional provisions, like the Second Amendment says there shall be a militia and the right to the arms. Everyone now says you get to have a right to a firearm. You know, how the heck did they read that out of that particular constitutional provision? But it's how the courts interpret it, and they go back, and we have to go back to 1889 when they're drafting these constitutions and say, what the heck were the framers thinking about? And our courts have a test when we see the U.S. Constitution and the state constitution, and they're different. And we go through what we call the gun wall factors. There's 6 of them. See what exactly were they talking about. And the bottom line on this thing is our court said we really interpret the state constitution the same as the federal constitution, with 2 exceptions. One, we think this is broader than the First Amendment as far as prior restraints. You can have waiting periods under the First Amendment. You can have permits that you have to get before you can do a parade. Washington says, no, we don't allow that. And as I said, also, usually under the Constitution, the state U.S. Constitution, they say, well, okay, if you have a significant government interest, you can have reasonable rules to prevent people from abridging those interests. Washington says, no, we think it's broad, it has to be compelling. But, you know, how the courts get to that test, it's not apparent from the language in the Constitution. Just know that Washington's Constitution is broader than the First Amendment. And it's part of our populist background. You know, we really are for individuals in Washington when we adopted it. Otherwise, we would have just said, hey, we adopt the U.S. Constitution. So they meant something different. But I'd like to talk a little bit further about how to fight speech and speech, and getting back to that, not only at the top level with Trump, but here at the college. And I think you all remember the Milo incident over at UW, where he was, and somebody actually got shot there. You know, and President Kelsey wrote a really good letter to saying this is not who we are, it's inclusive, and we would have the bystanders that get up. You had huge crowds that were outnumbering these groups of conservatives. And so it's really important for you to step up. It's important from the top down to go ahead and say there's a group on campus, they are saying something that some of you may find hateful. You don't need to go there if it's going to offend you. This is not who we are. You know, we're a loving, welcoming environment and so forth. And if you get that message across, it's going to really go miles. And that should start at the administration and the faculty and all the student body as well, as to say, hey, that's not right.
And I guess the question that I was going to pose was actually back to you. For clarity's sake, because as Elijah was talking, then we were like colluding here. It's like, well, what can we do? And one of the things that I remember very distinctly in relation to the Westboro protests in the past, and I was wondering how this connects with the heckler's veto, is the idea of being able to create a protective barrier, a visual protective barrier to hide the speech. Right, like how do we interpret the shouting down of somebody? Is it literally just shouting down somebody? Or can there be a way where a counter demonstration can just put a bunch of rainbow colored, umbrellas and just hide them?
The Westboro Baptists, they were on the sidewalks. They weren't in the cemetery.
Right.
So, the sidewalks are traditional public forums, and they actually probably could barely be heard from where the funeral is taking place. So there was some noise going on in the background. So it really, when they found out about it, people said it was hurtful, but there was a big barrier there in the first place. The heckler's veto is more like one person is shouting down somebody who's been asked to speak in an auditorium or something along that line. It wouldn't necessarily, sure, it's going to be, when you have huge groups and they're trying to shout out at each other, they're trying to get their message across. But rainbow barrier, I think more Jeff would say is that he's in between the groups. but it's they have a message. Okay, that's fine. We have a group of students who disagree with that message, and we want to make sure people know that we disagree with it here on campus, and they can have their group here too. The Milo one, they were all in Red Square, and they weren't being properly segregated. There wasn't enough law enforcement there, and actually it was the wife of one of the conservatives that shot somebody, and she's being prosecuted. So, and they violated the no guns on campus policy.
Shocking.
I'll speak something to there, Chris, Dr. Chris DeVoe. I'll say I've been in an institution to where when that happened, and it was deemed as a hate speech, and you wanted to know what the student activists did on top of that. What they did is they did combat it back, and they did talk back to what they felt was right, and then what it did was everybody walked around campus and saw these two groups talking to each other, very violent, very loud, and then what did that do? It was very strategic. Then that created a hostile environment, not necessarily that hostile, but then it disrupted learning. Right. Then the administration got a chance to walk in and say, everybody has to leave now, because now the learning environment. So, like how we were saying, you combat it back and back, but we couldn't tell the people to leave because they had every right to say what they wanted to say. But the student activists had every right to come back and say, well, we're going to come out and say we don't believe in this on our campus and not on our campus, and you need to leave. And then that's kind of how that happened.
Okay. I think it's interesting to note that we have all sorts of students in the course rooms too. I had a quarter where I had your office's help because I had an online course where the student was calling other students racial epithets, posting beheadings, utilizing a lot of extreme conspiracy theories, always posted between midnight and 6 a.m. So I'd wake up to the gift of so many things. And when I would take him down, he would repost them blacked out saying this is what your professor is doing to your learning so that you're not going to know the truth. Ultimately, we had to pull the entire Canvas course room down, so because it got so out of hand. But now, thanks to this office and to the support from my dean at the time, I have very clear policies that you come in my space, you talk, you don't attack anybody else. And if you can't do that, then you need to go. Because people are paying for the opportunity to learn here, and that is very important. A newer situation for me that happened this summer is I had a self-identified white nationalist who was in my class, And that got really tricky to navigate sometimes, where they wanted to share ideas, and what is insightful and what is not became hard to deal with. Hard on the students taking the class, but did he not have a right to take a class? So there are many issues that come out of this.
And I guess, in that case, if there were students who felt that the information or what was being given was something that they did not agree with and wanted it to stop, the students could actually report the student. So that's another avenue by which we can sort of, because it's a student themselves who are saying, this is something that I don't believe in. I've asked you to stop, but you haven't. So then that's when you can sort of move towards the conduct, the piece.
Any other questions?
Looks like we have the one last slide. What I wanted to do is to let everybody know that we do have the newly recomprised sort of a care team website. And so this is comprised of it's a multidisciplinary team that helps to take a look at issues that come up on our campus. So our folks that are, DeAndre is part of that team, Jeff, who's our campus security director, our counselors, we have deans that are part of this team as well. And so as things come up on our campus, we take a look at trends that are coming. We have a discussion to take a look at what could we do as a campus to be proactive about things that we see that are happening on our campus, or it could be about a particular student that has come up, and we want to look at the student from a holistic perspective. What's happening in the classroom? What's happening outside of the classroom? Just so that we can provide the support that's needed. So if the care team, another component that we're looking at now with the care team is to create what we call a bias response team. Working closely with Jeff and with DeAndre, we're going to be looking at sort of defining what is bias, what is hateful speech, and then creating a protocol so that when a student experiences hateful speech or sees something in the classroom or on the bulletin board that they don't agree with, they have a mechanism by which to report it. And then the bias response team will then take a look at how we can mitigate those things that we're seeing in our campus. So use this as a resource for our faculty members, students. If there is something that you see on campus that you are not comfortable with, there is a link to be able to do a report so that we can then start to document and figure out how best to support you.
I would also like to plug that the political science department will be continuing our political open forums at the end of January, so keep an eye out. We have booked Eliza Rankin, who has organized and done grassroots work for education K through 12. Her Facebook page represents 4,000 individuals in Seattle, in the Seattle area. And I'm working on booking one of the minority organizers too, because I want different perspectives to be represented. Jonathan, who's sitting here, and myself and Zachary Gass will be participating as well, and we'll make sure that everyone knows when that's happening.
We have other questions?
We don't have to force the question.
We won't force it. Everyone,